I really enjoyed it. And finally, when I was about 40, 41 or something like that, I wrote a rap song for my best friend, a D&D rap song, just as a joke. And I decided, hey, let's release a couple of these. These are a lot of fun. And so I started making a few. So.
I'm a player, baby. I'm playing this game. I'm a player. I got no shame. I'm a player, baby, I'm no NPC. I'm looking up the rules in my PHB in the half of an earth that I'm allowed to see. I never want to sit behind the DM screen. I'm a player, baby, I'm bringing the thunder. My lightning bolt will put you 6 feet under my gun.
Welcome to the Red Caps Podcast, a podcast where we dip our caps into the blood of our listeners and we ramble on about old school games. In today's episode, we are going to be sitting down and talking with MC/GM/DM Redwyrm. You just heard a little bit of his music there in the opener. And as cool as he is, the real star of today's show, we unfortunately won't hear from directly, but we are going to talk about him a lot. And that is Redwyrm's 7-year-old DM son, the Red Wormling. Conversations like this one that we're going to listen to here in a moment are what I really, really enjoy about doing this show. And I hope you guys have as much fun listening to this as I did being there. So with that, I'm going to ask you to please sit back, listen, and enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined by the Redwyrm, who's come on to the Red Caps podcast. Welcome, Daniel. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
I've got a few questions I'm going to get out of the way first, because there's definitely a topic of this conversation that I want to focus on in terms of a person who's not with us at the moment. But let's start with you first.
Sure.
I was looking over some stuff. I encountered you, as I'm sure many people who might be listening to this have been, via social media on Twitter, X, and some of your really hilarious posts. But as I went looking just to put some stuff down, I didn't realize, and I should have, I guess, if I would have ever went to your webpage before, that you're also a talented musician.
Well, talented is might be in quotes there. I don't know, but I do have a few songs that I've released. So yes.
And I had not expected. So whenever I saw there was music, I was like, oh, cool. And then when I hit play, my ears got treated to something you don't normally hear when it comes to tabletop RPGs, especially not D&D in particular. Typically, if you're listening to a D&D related song, the genre you're going to get is like rock or metal, but that's not what you put out at all.
No. And the main reason for that is because I can't sing. And so the only choice left for me was to actually rap. So I've loved rap since I was little. I've always enjoyed it, particularly plays on words and rhymes and things that were in the rap songs. And so I've been writing rap songs since I was a kid, and I really enjoyed it. And finally, when I was about 40, 41 or something like that, I wrote a rap song for my best friend, a D&D rap song, just as a joke. And I decided, hey, let's release a couple of these. These are a lot of fun. And so I started making a few. So,
and how has the releases gone? What's the reaction to that been like? Because it wasn't more like me where you're like, oh wow, I didn't hear anybody do rap for D&D before. Or...
Yeah, I was really surprised. I have a handful of people who have found me because they were looking for like D&D related songs and happened to stumble upon them. It's done really well on Spotify. I think one of them has close to 100,000 listens. So I'm excited about that. The new ones are in the 30,000. So they've done well. I don't make any money on it much. Maybe $15 every couple of months, comes in for a royalty check, but that's about it. But it's a lot of fun. I have probably 20 rap songs written. I just haven't ever recorded them. It's not an expertise that I have to sit there and record music. So I write new music, but I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. I have a new one coming out fairly soon, hopefully, called Magic Hands. It's a song about Big B and the various forms of magic hand spells, that mostly an older edition, since the new edition just has one spell. But the old one had 20 some different Big B hand spells. And so that was kind of an inspiration for that one.
Very cool. So it's kind of like a creative outlet for you. I was on my notes I had written down, is this like a part of your normal day job, what have you? But it sounds like this is like just like a creative thing that you're doing on the side.
Yeah, it's fully just a creative outlet. Kind of I'm driving home from work and these lyrics are in my head type thing, as opposed to I'm an engineer by trade. That's my job, so I don't have any kind of and not a sound engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer, so it's not like I'm sitting here doing any kind of sound music creating things or anything of the sort. So yeah.
Do you find is it a difficult process to, so there's one thing to write the lyrics, but is it another thing to actually kind of like get the final mix together and choosing the underlying music and everything else for it? Or is...
So I've always played around with electronic music a little bit. It's just a hobby, and I've enjoyed that. So that wasn't the challenge writing the music. To me, the biggest challenge is actually recording my voice and putting it onto the music. So I have the music written for numerous songs, but it's the recording process of my voice to get it on there. And I can't stand the way my voice sounds. I think a lot of us have that problem. And so I don't like any of the takes that I do. And so I just move on and then come back to it later and then come back again. So that's why I haven't finished the album that I had originally written.
Yeah, I can relate to that. If I go back and listen to any old episodes, it's just pure cringe. I can't stand listening to, especially the very early ones. And that's part of the reason I started going to the interviews in a way, was that other people get to talk and they don't just listen.
Yeah. I can understand that. Yeah, I don't like the sound of my own voice speaking or singing, really, or rapping in this case, but it's still fun. So,
and so you mentioned that you're a mechanical engineer. Is there anything that you find carries over from, I guess, the logical and procedural ways that you go through that sort of a job to your gaming? Is that something that you find applies at all?
Well, so I started gaming in the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons era 40 years ago. And that was, my mindset immediately took to the rules and to trying to figure out how the rules work and understanding that. And that's still exactly what I do in engineering. I mean, we analyze a problem, we try and figure out how the best way to solve it. And I think that kind of almost metagaming or power gaming type aspect of the game is very much there. But I have actually leaned really towards the other direction in my gaming more recently. I really enjoy the storytelling, the role-playing aspects, and it's kind of more so because I get to have that outlet for myself away from the engineering side of life.
Right.
So,
yeah. The way you were describing the problem solving, that's how I've always kind of described to people the difference between player skill versus character skills. So where the player has the skill to sit there and churn through these options in their mind and come up with that. But so what games do you, if you came up through the AD&D days, what sort of games do you play now? Like, are you mostly 5th edition, or are you playing other games? What is a perfect game night for you? If somebody inviting you over, you're like, yes, that's the game I want to be playing.
In regards to gaming, what we play is 5e. So my son and I play all 5e. That's the rules he's learned. I run games for him and all of his friends. They play 5e. We found it's pretty much the easiest for kids to jump in on. There's enough meat to it that they like it, but there's not so much that it complicates the game and they get confused. And so they can really lean into the role playing. Those that really like the crunch of the game, we have a few kids that like that. There's enough there they can do it without being overwhelmed. With my wife and I play a one-on-one game. We've played the same campaign for 23 years now or something of that sort. And we've kind of it really started out in 2nd edition. We moved to 3rd edition. We kind of added in some 5th edition stuff. But at this point, it's just kind of, there's not really even an edition. It's kind of all of our own rules together. We played so much of this campaign that, we just kind of have simplified the rules down to what we want and just use those. So it's kind of, I couldn't do that with any other campaign. It wouldn't make sense, but we've played so much together that it's our own.
You've made your own game.
Yeah, exactly.
Frameworks of it.
Yeah.
So do you act as DM, or do you guys swap those rules back and forth, or is it a 2 players and it's like more of like a solo where it's a generator that's helping be the DM?
I'm the DM in that. I've been the DM the whole time. She's played one character. She played a knight. Well, he started out as a rogue, and then he became a knight, and so she just played that guy, and she loved him, and we just went through it. He's gone through all the levels of 3rd edition, from up through epic level, deity type levels, which they had stuff you could do that in 3rd edition, and he's still going. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's really neat. Okay, I'm going to switch over to the person that drove me to this, who's not here, but I'm going to let you speak for him.
Yeah,
the 7-year-old DM, which is the title of that alone is attention grabbing, but it didn't start off as a 7-year-old DM.
No, it didn't.
I went back looking, 4-year-old DM.
Yeah, so yeah, he started DMing when he was 4. He had been playing for 2 years at that point. So we started playing when he was 2.
Get him young, folks. Get him young.
Yeah, and I get a lot of people that ask me like, "Hey, when can I start with my kid?" And I just say, "Start him now." And it doesn't matter how young they are. So he and I, of course, he had seen his mom and I play D&D every day, pretty much. We play a lot, so he'd seen that. And when he was 2, he said, "Can I make a character?" And so I said, "Okay, let's do this." So we rolled some dice, and I helped him add them up. I wrote all the stuff down. He wanted to play a character that was really old. So he chose an 18-year-old knight.
Because that's really old for.
That's really old for a 2-year-old. He was really tall. He was taller than me, and I'm 5'10", so it's not like I'm that tall. But he wanted, that was his perspective on things. He made this knight. His name was Sir Tyson, and Sir Tyson had a squire named Gruff, and Gruff kind of became my son's character. And what we did is I told stories. I just told bedtime stories, and he just sat there. He just absorbed it. He loved it. And as we played, as I did these stories, eventually I kind of started saying, "What do you think they would do? What would Gruff do in this situation? What would Tyson do?" And he would tell me, and then I'd incorporate that into the story. And at that point, you're basically, doing a shared storytelling, a role playing game. After a little while, I said, "Well, let's roll a dice to see if what he wants to do works." And we'd roll a dice, and if it was high, he'd win. If it was low, he'd fail. And we'd have to try something else. And so I kept adding in rules at that point. And pretty soon we're playing full D&D. And then COVID hit. And so my best friends from Pennsylvania, where I grew up, and I decided to play a game together. My son wanted to sit on my lap and watch the game. And at this point, he was a little more than 3. So he's like 3.5. And so the first game he watches, then he wanted to play a character. So we made him a pixie paladin that he could... I figured a pixie would be great because he could do whatever he wanted to as a chaotic little 3-year-old, and it would make sense in the game. And if he didn't show up one game or didn't want to play anymore, the pixie just did something else, as the Fae might do. And he sat on my lap and played that game every single day. Every time we play, every week he was there. We all played together, and he sat there and wanted to get invested in the rules and loved it. That campaign came to an end, maybe after 3 or 4 months. We didn't go very long, and we started a new one. And my son made a half-orc wizard. He was still 3 at the time, and we played that campaign for probably 1.5 years, and so it was a lot of fun. He brought so much new insight from my perspective to watch a 3-year-old play a wizard, to see how they're going to do it and what they're going to do, and how he's going to, and a half orc too. I mean, typically from my perspective as a half orc, you have a parent that's a human and a parent that's an orc. And so I asked him which of his parents was which, and he said, "Well, they're both half orcs because we're all half orcs." And so it was just a new perspective there. Like, I never really thought much about that, and he just assumed that all the half orcs were half orcs. That wasn't like they were,
it's not Gen 1. Yeah, they're not Gen 1. It could be Gen 15 or something down the line.
Exactly. And he wanted his parents to be happily married, and they were both productive members of society. It was such a heartwarming thing for me to see, and I've loved it. And so we've been playing ever since. When he was 4, he decided he wanted to run the games. He wanted to be in charge. And so I said, "Well, what kind of character do you want me to play?" And he had been studying the American Revolution. So he made my character for me named Redcoat, who was a British soldier that was stationed in America right before the Revolutionary War. And so that was the game we played. And I met George Washington. I think our first adventure, I was hanging out with George Washington. We were fighting zombies in Mount Vernon, and we fought a lich, down by the Potomac River. It was just kind of this whole thing that he'd been studying. He just put it right into his game. And we played Redcoat for years. Well, probably 2 years. Every once in a while we'll still play him and bring him up, but he's run lots of other games since then, but that was the one that got him started at 4 years old.
So the typical advice when it comes to playing tabletop games with kids is keeping the sessions fairly short. But sounds like you were playing with him in like the campaign that you ran with your friends. Did you guys keep those sessions short, or were those kind of like standard hour, 2 hour, 3 hour sessions?
They were 3-hour sessions. I think the biggest thing for kids is you can't keep them in one place. So I was sitting on the computer. He'd sit on my lap in the beginning, but if he got a little bored, he'd jump up and he'd go play with some toys. He'd be listening to the campaign, but he had something to do. Or he'd jump up and go get his pretend battle axe and fight with it or whatever. He wanted to act out things. He wanted to be more active than just sitting there at the computer. But at the same time, he did really well. He sat very still at that point. Now it's actually he's more active, and it's harder to get him to sit at the computer. He wants to jump around and do things. We still play that same the three of us and my son still play every single week. We're probably on our fourth or fifth campaign at this point.
So obviously with that campaign, that's a group of your friends.
Yes.
I remember watching ages ago Professor Dungeon Master on YouTube. I'm sure you may have seen some of his videos. He's talked about how his son he's taken his son when he was young to Gen Con, had his son run games there for adults and what have you. What was the, both from a player perspective and also so adults playing with the kid, and then possibly the kid running the games for other adults. I'm not sure if he's ran for anybody other than his mom and dad, but how has that dynamic gone? What's been the general? Has it been like the amusement of watching somebody this fresh to it and this excited about it and kind of get wrapped up in it, or has there been kind of like a little bit of skepticism to like, really we're gonna play with a little kid?
Yeah, my friends, we've been friends since we were in high school. And they have kids, so they were happy to have my son there with us. He has run one game for them. He ran a campaign for them, kind of based on Star Wars. It was kind of a medieval Star Wars, the same plot line but different characters, and it was a fun set. I think we ran 3 sessions on that game. He has also run we have a bunch of friends here in town, and he ran for his friends and their dads, and he ran a campaign. He wrote a whole campaign called Hall of Bones. It was this like module that he made, and it was I think we've done 3 sessions on that one as well. And he ran the campaign. Basically, it was intended to be a one-shot that took 3 sessions to run. But he ran for them. They do they were excited about it, but the kids just loved it. They actually, the other kids loved it. They had a dungeon master as a kid, and he does a really good job. So in that same group of kids, I run a weekly game for them, and each week I have a different one of the kids help me be the dungeon master for that game. And so they'll come up with their ideas and we'll run them, and we run those for the kids. And so like my son ran last week, and he had a whole game plan up for the kids. It was a blast. The kids loved it. And then next week it'll be a different kid running the game. So we do that nonstop. But I haven't run with strangers at any point. We haven't gone to any conventions or anything and run for strangers. That would be he'd probably be pretty intimidated by that.
Yeah, I mean it's a new group of people. I think every person that runs for strangers at some point is intimidated. So it's add on the dynamic there of the age. I can definitely see that. But has there been common themes that come up in his games, just based off of whatever he happens to be into in real life? Like, is there? Yeah.
So obviously, Star Wars is huge for him. Lord of the Rings, and those are his main inspirations. When he first started, he hadn't seen those yet, and so he was more focused on the things he was studying in his. He's homeschooled, so we school him at home, and so whatever he's studying at the time, whether it's ancient Greek civilization or American Revolution or any of those type of things, that's what he's into. Some of the main themes he has is he doesn't like to kill people in the games. So like the bad guys can't be people. So he doesn't want, or if they are, they have to be saved or rescued as opposed to being killed. So he doesn't like that death. So normally most of his bad guys are undead. And he has no problems killing undead or their constructs or their oozes or things that aren't typical people. He just doesn't have like the mayor's a bad guy and it's time to go kill the mayor type thing or something of that sort. Because if that, it just bothers him to think of that. He would rather the mayor might be the bad guy. We have to go capture him and convince him what he was doing was wrong type of thing.
Right.
In his games.
And I think that's exactly why we have a lot of like the standard tropes of having those creatures in these games. They can become the, go and fight and destroy these things, and you don't have to think about the morality of it because
exactly.
Yeah. The so you started putting out blog posts and Twitter posts and what have you of almost like kids say the darndest things type style of like, hey, this
Exactly.
is what this is what my 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old DM has said about this. And what's the response kind of been to that? Like when you put those out, I saw a YouTube video you have posted up, which is hilarious, listening to him read basically mean tweets, doing the was it Jimmy Fallon that does that, or I forget which.
One of them does that. Yeah, I'm not sure which one it was.
But yeah, has that been the typical response where people just are completely in disbelief, or is it?
So when I first started, it was people really liked it. I think one of my first Twitter posts about him was I just asked him, I said, what kind of advice would you give to players to play D&D? And he'd been playing for a little while now, and I thought it would be good to see. And so I posted up this little graphic that had advice for players and advice for DMs. And a lot of it was just weird stuff a little kid comes up with, like a dungeon master should always wear a hat. It's important for a dungeon master to have a hat on, and it was silly things like that, but it was fun, and it got really good response on Twitter. I originally come to Twitter simply to promote the rap songs that I created, and it kind of morphed from that to something completely different. But Reddit is a completely different story. So I posted a few things on Reddit. Some of them did really well, but there's a lot of people there who just think I'm lying about it, that I'm making it all up, that it's not what he actually said. They think that I'm just doing it for karma, which I don't even understand what karma is on Reddit. I'm too old for that.
Fake internet points.
Yeah, fake internet points. That's what they say. So, I mean, and some of the things are really mean, so he read some mean tweets there, but a lot of the comments more recently, I mean, I'm pretty much banned from D&D memes at this point, because as soon as I post anything, I get like 500 people come in and tell me to leave, and a lot of other worse things to do because they think I'm lying. So I've kind of quit going to Reddit.
Yeah, it's interesting how different people have different like gut reactions to the various social media platforms, right? Yeah. Because if you were to ask, I bet you if you were to go post on Reddit, maybe not with your account, but just with a random account, and be like, which social media platform has more mean takes? Would it be Twitter or would it be Reddit? I bet you the people on Twitter would be saying that Twitter is worse.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. But yeah, I can totally see that where on Reddit folks would just have that. I think it's because on Reddit it's more of a long form and people want to debate.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah.
But what was his reaction when he saw the ones that you were able to filter out and show to him? What was his reaction to that?
He just thought they were hilarious because people didn't think he existed. So and he knows he exists, so he just thinks it's really funny that, like, why wouldn't they think this? This is weird. And he laughed about it and enjoyed reading those tweets.
So when he sits down, is it just like my son and I will have chats before bed where I've always, rather than me tell him stories, I get him to tell me stories for bedtime.
Yeah,
because it's always awesome. More fun that way.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Is that kind of how the creation process of some of these conversations happen? Like you're just like sitting around, or it's bedtime, what have you, and you're like, hey, tell me about this, and then are you like sitting there writing it down? Or are you trying to do it off memory, or?
No, I have to. I don't write it down at the time. Normally, what'll happen is he'll tell me something. If I'm near my phone, or if I'm at home, or if we're doing something where I have my phone there, I might just type it up real quick if I thought it was funny a few minutes later. But normally, a lot of them are actually in our games. So when we play together, a lot of the tweets I write are strictly just like, this is what happens to my character. My character sees this. I think one of my most popular ones was the spider dragon, where the dragon breeds out millions of spiders on my character, and that was right from our game. And then I took that monster and used it in my adult game that I run because it was that awesome to me. So it was a lot of fun. But those type of things happen in the game. Other things, he'll just be talking to me. So I'll come home for dinner and we're chatting about things over dinner, and he brings something up, or in that evening, that just comes up and he just talks about it. It might be a joke he has. He does he's really into puns right now, so he loves any kind of joke he can make about a pun. And he loves just looking into the rules. He'll be sitting down with the rules and trying to analyze them or understand them and figure them out. And you're like, this doesn't make any sense. And then he starts asking me questions about it and brings up a new topic or something of that sort. So yeah, it's just conversation normally in our evenings as we're hanging out together.
Yeah, my son's a big fan. He used to do it more when he was a little bit younger. He's like he's 9 years old now, so he's a little bit older than yours.
Yeah.
But when he was younger, he loved asking. We've got one of those Google Assistants, and he would constantly go over to the Google Assistant and be like, "Hey, tell me a joke, or tell me a knock knock joke." And he'd study these jokes from Google for ages, and then he'd come and like, you know, give us little shows off of it and everything else as well.
That's awesome.
But the some of the things that has come out of those I thought was really interesting. So two things that one from a blog post and one from a recent Twitter post that you had up. I really liked when he had the items for chase, making chases more interesting.
Yes, yeah.
And he had the one of the list of tips that were in there. I really like the idea of using innocence. I guess it'd be more if you're doing an urban-based adventure, but just, you know, the idea of having crowds of people and using those crowds of people, and you know, having them interfere, whether it's intentionally or not. I thought was a really good tip that a lot of adult DMs wouldn't necessarily think of as well. So I thought that was really cool. And then
I'm sure for that one it was inspired from Star Wars. You know, he's watched a lot of the Clone Wars, and he's watched all the Clone Wars several times, and so he loves the cartoons. And so those shows oftentimes have like somebody maneuvering through a city or something of the sort, and there's people in the way. And so I'm sure that it was probably somewhat of the inspiration for that. And he's like, well, what would a hero do in the situation where something's falling or something's, you know, gonna hurt somebody, or someone's in the way and not trying to be in the way but is blocking your path? What do you do? And so he wanted to see what my character would do in that situation.
And the one from Twitter recently that I liked was the baby beholders that were essentially piranhas with laser shooting at them. I was like, that is freaking awesome. And as I'm looking over these, I'm like, this kid needs a zine. You need to make a book or publish a zine or something. And then did I hear that might be something that you guys were considering?
So right now, we are really close to finishing a monster manual for him. So he's only got a handful of monsters in it, but it has some monster lore. It's for beholders, it's for the spider dragon, and it's for the chicken squirrel, which is kind of like a baby version of an owlbear. It's a chicken squirrel. And so those are the monsters that he's analyzed. He's given a bunch of lore in there, and then we're gonna put that out on DM's Guild sometime. I was hoping to do it today because I was hoping to get it finished, but I haven't done it yet, so it's close. But it's just we're in the editing process right now. So awesome. It has some of his original artwork. It's got some all the lore that he created up. Yeah, with the Beholder, he created that probably 2 years ago when he was 5. He really got into beholders, and he was just fascinated by them as creatures. And he was like, the dream thing doesn't make any sense to me. That's just silly. I don't understand that. And I'm like, well, what would you want to do in your world is what I asked. And that's kind of how I ask him. I prompt him for a lot of these questions. I just like, so what's going to happen in your world? And he comes up with ideas for it. And so he really came up with this fascinating idea to me that each beholder, that the beholder lays eggs, they're kind of like frog eggs. And each beholder egg has its own personality. And then as they start to grow, one of them starts to eat the other ones. And as they eat the other ones, they gain those powers and they gain eye stalks. And so the eye stalks are actually different beholders that have been eaten by the main beholder. And this was his whole idea. And so a baby might have one eye stalk because it's eating one other beholder, and then it's swimming around and it can shoot these eye rays at people or at the other ones. And he came up with this whole idea. We played out numerous adventures where I encountered beholder eggs, which was kind of interesting. And it's kind of has flowed into his entire lore. And the reason he now says that so the dream thing came about is that Xanathar in Waterdeep just decided he's going to put out some fake lore on beholders because he's a beholder and he doesn't want anyone to know how to defeat beholders. So everything we know about beholders is not true because Xanathar made it up. That's his belief. It's all propaganda from Xanathar. So I thought that was a lot of fun. So,
oh, that's really neat. Yeah, it's interesting how some of these classic monsters can grab the attention. Oh, speaking of which, when that does come to the DM's Guild, please definitely let me know the link, and I will include that in the show notes for everybody.
Excellent.
But my son also went through the beholder phase of that being like his favorite monster. Like we had a one Halloween, the pumpkin was a beholder. We had all the little pumpkins stuck off of it, and he loved that too. He's a big fan of. So we don't do a whole lot of 5e here, just because it's not a game that I personally dig into. But As far as like Wizards of the Coast books, we buy a lot of the Jim Zub's
Yeah.
Young Adventure Club books, and he really really likes those. If anybody's not aware of them, they don't really have a lot of rules in them, but they're more lore and just giving kind of an overview. Have you exposed those to him at all, or?
So are you talking about the 5th edition ones?
Yeah,
The original. Yeah, we have the whole original set that came out, and he's got several other ones as well. He loves them.
We stopped. One second, I'm just going to look over. I think we stopped after like 5 of them. I want to say that there's about 1, 2, 3, no 6. We've got 6 over there that we've got. And yeah, we kind of stopped collecting them after that. I think there's some now where the content overlaps between other ones as well.
I think there's like a monster compendium book that has some of the other monster, the bestiary in it or whatever. So yeah, there's definitely a blend. But yeah, we love those books. They're great, and I recommend them for all the kids in my group too, because the kids kind of get overwhelmed by the rules sometimes, and so they can just kind of read through these books and see, hey, this is what the game's supposed to be like, and it applies to pretty much any edition because it's just simply role playing and lore and monsters and different things of the sort. So I highly recommend this. It's great.
So you mentioned that he runs a game for his friends in the neighborhood, and you also run a game for his friends as well. How many kids? What's the size of that sort of a group?
So it started out, there was there's about 20 kids in the group. There's 2 DMs. It's me and one of the other dads that run the game. And then, like I said, I'll bring in each of the kids and let them DM a session, on a cycle. So my group has 9 kids in it right now. And most of them show up most of the time. So it depends on if they show up or not. It depends on what their parents are doing at the time. So we normally have between 7 and 9 kids in the game. And right now, we just started a new campaign in January. So the old one had gone for 2.5 years. And so now this one started in January. We kind of mixed the groups up between the 2 dads. And it's really going good. The characters are all 2nd level. Now we play every week. Every Wednesday afternoon we play. So it's a lot of fun.
So one of the interviews that will be coming out just before this one does is for a gentleman who runs a nonprofit that helps support clubs in schools and libraries and have you. Obviously, if your son's homeschooled, he's not stumbling into a D&D club at school.
No.
So how did you gather up the group? Is it like the neighborhood kids, or do you have any tips for somebody who's trying to find a group for maybe a kid who's homeschooled or a kid whose school doesn't do these sort of programs?
So for us, what it was is when he was 4, we were involved in a homeschool group that had what they call tabletoppers, which was just the kids all get together and play games, and it was board games mostly and things of the sort. But one of the dads was running D&D. He was pretty new at it, but he was doing an awesome job. And so my son and I came to it, and I just kind of sat back and let it happen. I didn't get involved even with the experience I've had in D&D. I just let it happen, and my kid loved it. And pretty soon the group kind of swelled so big that it was too much for one dad to run. So I took over half the group. We split it up, and we've just been running it ever since. It's been a blast, and all the kids have just really taken to D&D. I mean, it's no other board games at this point. We just all get together and play D&D. It's considered the D&D group now instead of just games, but they all love it. But they're all homeschool kids, and it's probably ages 5 to 13. And it's one of the great things about homeschool is you don't have like a bunch of 7-year-olds. You have a wide range of kids. So they get to learn from each other appropriate behavior, and they get to learn like what the older kids do and interact really well in a wide range of ages and different personalities. So it's a lot of fun. Different kids will have different ideas and different aspects of the game that they really want to focus on, but we have a blast.
Yeah, it was. So my son, when he was really young, went through the Montessori program from basically age 1 through till age 6 or 7. Went through the Montessori program, and that was one of the things we really enjoyed with that forum as well, was the way that they mixed the age groups, and they kind of did they almost did like a master apprentice type relationship with the kids as they went through, right? And I always enjoyed that. I thought that was really, really cool. Has there been any great tips or experiences that you've come out of running for kids in various age groups like that. Is there things that you think people should definitely look into doing, or things they should avoid? Is there things like, the kids respond better to theater of the mind versus having minis, or is there anything along those lines that you would put out?
Yeah, I got a lot. So one of the big things for me that I learned early was, I mean, I can get into a big discussion on safety tools for kids. Kids have weird fears, so you want to talk about that in the beginning of, hey, what do you kids not want to experience? And they don't even know what they don't want to experience. So they have to be willing to say, I don't know, but if it's too scary for me, I'll let you know. And so I had a skeleton, and I thought it was a pretty funny skeleton. It wasn't real scary, but one of the kids couldn't stand it. And so okay, we'll stop this. We'll make it a skeleton made out of candy instead. So we made a candy skeleton, and they love that. They all enjoyed killing the candy monsters. That was so much more fun for them. But you have to really understand that the kids and their beliefs can change. Their views can change on what's scary. My son used to be terrified of gelatinous cubes. They were just the most scary thing to him. The idea of being trapped inside this jelly type thing that's burning you alive was hideous, and he could not stand it. And now he loves them. So, their opinions on the monsters can change. And so I think that dialogue, that openness with the kids is important if you want to have a fun game. And actually running the game, I think keeping it short. Our games are about an hour. Sometimes they go a little longer than that. Sometimes they're 25 minutes and we're done. I can see the kids are losing interest, or the kids there's something else that's attracting them. It's a beautiful day. They're being distracted by something else, or they're just not into the game. And so I'll just cut it off and we'll say, okay, we'll pick up there next week, and we shut it down. I think it's important also to realize as a dungeon master that there's no, your story might sound really cool to you, but the kids don't care. And they're and I guess it's like any dungeon, any game you're running. But for me, I have this idea set up, and the kids then decide they want to go shopping and buy magic weapons, or they want to learn the ingredients for a potion and make that potion, or raise a baby dragon egg up to hatch it, or something. That's their whole focus. And they're so much more excited about that than they ever would be about the plot I created, or the story, or the conflict that I was creating. And so they really just embrace that. And you have to be willing to change and go that direction. Whatever they're finding fun, you need to let go of your adventure or your idea of what it was going to be, and just be flexible.
So if you embrace that chaos, when you go to play with them or run for them, are you doing very much prep, or are you going, there's no way to prep because I have no idea what they're going to do, so I'm just going to roll with it as it comes? Is that?
So I did run an old school adventure for them to start out this campaign. It was the Quest for the Silver Sword. It's an old, it's not really first or second edition. It's the D&D edition from the late 80s, I guess. It's got a big fold out map. It's a lot of fun. So we ran that, but even in that, the prep was hard. There's some rats in there, and they decided they wanted to befriend some rats, and they did some charming on these rats, and got these rats to talk to them. And I mean, it was really, not what you expect from that adventure. So yeah, at this point, I have a general theme of what I want to do, and I don't do any prep. But the fun part for me is that these kids are in the same world as my adult group, which are all these kids' dads. So I run a game for all their dads as well. And the two groups are interacting, and they don't even know it yet. So what the kids decide to do impacts the world that the dads are in. So it's been a lot of fun to do that and see the dads like, wait, what? The kids are doing the same thing. They're looking for the same diamonds we're looking for, or whatever it might be. So, but
do you do fairly this? Sorry, I've recorded a bunch of these interviews back to back over the last couple of days.
Okay.
So it's funny how some of the themes are going back and forth. So I apologize. To me, this is funny, and you don't have the context for it. But with that exact scenario, do you find that doing like a 1-to-1 time type idea is like, how do you handle the time disparity between the two groups if you're doing that, or is it something that you just hand wave? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's kind of hand wave it. So the dads play once a month, the kids play every week. So I don't really try to worry too much about it. Whenever the dads get to the game at the same time frame the kids are in, I'll have something to interact, and we don't try to do the 1-to-1 or anything of the sort.
Are they acting as competing adventuring groups, or is it just by circumstance they happen to be in the same area at the same time?
It's more circumstance. The dads are all, I think they're 9th level now at this point. We've run this campaign for a couple 2 years, and they're searching for some diamonds that basically fill out this magical crown that controls dragons, and the kids just happen to find one of the diamonds. And so they don't know what it is yet, and the dads don't know the kids have it yet, but they, so there's going to be a lot of interaction there, and the kids' characters are just, it's in the same world, roughly the same time, and we'll just see where it goes. So
that's really cool. You mentioned that with the kids group, you try to get some of them to run the game every once in a while.
Yeah.
Which I think is important for all groups, being able to get somebody else a DM so that you as a DM don't get burnt out. But in your case, I guess we should all be thanking you for training the next generation of DMs coming up. But what has been the experience of letting them run the game? Do you find you have to step in and help much, or is it once they've done it once or twice, you can kind of sit back and just enjoy it?
So it depends on the kid. Some of the kids come with a map, and they've come with a whole plot and what they wanted to do. And some of the kids just said, I want my kids to show up in Super Mario World. And I want the characters to show up there. And I'm like, okay, we'll hold back a bit. What are we going to do here? What are the monsters? And they're bringing in monsters from Legend of Zelda or other things they experience, which is great. And they give them stats, and they make up these characters. But sometimes I have to guide that. So it depends on the kid. My son runs the game. He's pretty experienced at it, so I let him just kind of run it. And then just basically help. When you got 9 kids playing a game, you got to move through things pretty quick. So, excuse me, I try to help with that. So I'll end up running an initiative for them and helping out things. And okay, you're up next type things to keep the game going faster. With the other kids, sometimes I'm like, they give me the idea, and I DM it, and then they just throw ideas in depending on how they want to do things. And it's a whole range depending on the child.
Your avatar on Twitter and what have you does not match your name at all. So it's Redwyrm, and then is the avatar a lich? That's how I view it. But you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But how do you juxtapose these two very different creatures, and why each one for its intended purpose?
Okay, so the name Redwyrm came from just us trying to find a good rap name, for a D&D rapper, something to know. And Redwyrm flowed off the tongue. It just had a good sound. It could be used in song where you just kind of start out Redwyrm type thing or something of the sort, where it's kind of the announcement of who's rapping, as it's done oftentimes in hip hop music. And so that was where I came from. But I tried to draw a dragon, and I couldn't do it very well. It was a pretty bad looking dragon. And so the avatar that I use is my own personal remake of the Lich from the first edition Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual. So if you look at that Lich, it's this real scary Lich. It's drawn by David Trampier, and it was when I was 8 years old and I saw that, I was terrified of it. It gave me true nightmares. And it was just the scariest picture. So I drew it kind of a cartoon style and added color to it. And that became my avatar. And I don't really know why, but it kind of became a symbol there, and it just stuck. And so I don't want to change at this point. I think everyone kind of recognizes it, and I don't really want to move to something different.
No, it looks fantastic. So that is your drawing, your rendition of that creature.
It's my drawing, yeah.
And if you were to, so over the 40 some odd years that you said you've been playing, is there a monster that is, feels very, very personal to you? You're like, this is mine. Like, I'm going to feature this. I'm going to find a way to sneak this creature in almost every game if I can, or anything along those lines.
I love liches. There's just something about them. So, I mean, the current game we're playing with the dads that I run is all about Vecna and his minions. My son, for some reason, he's never been afraid of liches, so we've used them a lot. So he just loves them. In the game that he ran for me, we had several liches that were my friends. Because I fought them originally, and then they became friends with me as we reconciled. I just think they're great creatures. They're fascinating. They're magic users. I love wizards to begin with. I mean, if I had a choice to play a character in D&D, it's always a wizard. So I just love the magic. I love that idea of the character, and they're the most powerful wizards, and they're immortal, and there's just so much to them that make great villains. And so I think the Lich is my favorite. That artwork is probably my favorite artwork out of any D&D artwork, the one that he made. Though it scared me as a kid, I really came to I mean, I see that it just sparks a feeling within me of this is Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. With over the course of this whole time, D&D has gone through a bunch of different revisions, different editions, different styles, different goals for what the game is supposed to be. And we're entering a phase now where there's going to be a new edition sometime in the not so distant future. And everybody's saying it's not going to be that major of a shift, but there'll be some sort of a shift. What do you think how do you think the looking backwards for your little guy? He's coming in and that was his first. Like everybody I think uses that as their reference point from that point on. So like whatever D&D you started with is how you judge all future editions from there. Has there been anything where you're looking at that going, oh man, I hope they don't change this because he's really into that? Or is it just like, we don't care, we're just gonna play 5th edition because you've got the book and the game doesn't matter at that point. You run whatever you have.
So for me, I mean, I started with I think it was the Moldvay Basic Edition.
That's my favorite version.
Yeah, I love that. I had the box set, but we also had the Player's Handbook, AD&D Player's Handbook at the same time. So we kind of morphed those two originally. I went through 2nd edition. We got all the splat books, and we loved that with my friends in high school. 3rd edition came out, and my wife and I embraced that, and we played that. My friends and I played that a little bit. Remote back then, but that was pretty tough to do remote in the early 2000s or whatever when that came out. But I didn't really do much in 4th edition, didn't get into that one. But 5th edition is what my friends brought up whenever we wanted to start this new campaign during COVID. They're like, let's do 5th edition. And I had never played it. I was like, okay, I'm a 3rd edition guy. I love 3rd edition at this point. Let's do 5th edition. And so I bought the Player's Handbook and we started playing and I fell in love with the edition. I think it's got some great aspects to it. It's the closest I've seen back to Moldvay out of any of the editions since Moldvay. And so there's so much Dungeon Master control, but I think it's a horrible edition to try to learn how to Dungeon Master in. I have a friend right now who's trying to understand how to run the game, the one that runs for the other group of kids, and he struggles with there's just not a set of rules that really make sense to him on how to use the monsters. There's no guidance on that. And so he really struggles with how to run a game. But for someone who's experienced running the game, I have no problems with it. I'm very familiar with it. I'm used to it and I enjoy it.
Yeah. One of the things I really like is monster manuals that kind of spill out strategies of how the monsters would work rather than assuming that you have that back knowledge.
I agree 100%.
That actually brings up, you mentioned earlier that the little guy is big into Star Wars and Lord of the Rings stuff, and I guess that leads me to, for kids that they didn't come up with the same media we did, so they don't have the same shared thought on what a fantasy setting is or what have you. Is there things that you've seen where kids that didn't have the same sort of a background just take things completely differently? Or I guess also connected to that, is there anything that you think go show your kids this while you're playing? It's going to help things out a lot.
So some of the kids are, it's interesting. They're big into different things. I have one kid that loves dinosaurs and ninjas, and so that's like his thing. And he's not into medieval fantasy or Lord of the Rings or anything. That's because they haven't seen that. But he loves dinosaurs and he loves ninjas. So his character's name is Inferno Ninja. That's his character's name. Kids come up with some interesting names, but he loves ninjas. So that's his character. He just wants to be a ninja, wants to fight stuff. And so I bring in these fantasy elements from our game, from traditional D&D, like a mimic or something. And he's not into it the same way, but if it was a dinosaur that showed up, he would love that. And so I realized I take in what they experience. And we have other kids, at this point, they're pretty much all into D&D so much that they've really embraced the D&D world, but they still, I don't know if they have much media that really reflects that. There aren't many media kid-friendly typical movies. I mean, none of them have been allowed to watch Lord of the Rings or anything of that sort yet. Of course, my son watched it when he was 4, but he had a different mentality than a lot of kids do. So I think he was 5 when we watched it. But so there's a lot of I just assume they understand it, don't even think about it. But yeah, they don't know. But I think most of them have watched the Dungeons and Dragons movie at this point, so they've enjoyed that. So they got that context at least, and they enjoyed that. So
that's really good. So when I pinged out to you on Twitter and was like, "Hey, do you mind coming on and chatting?" Was there anything where you're like, "Oh, okay, I'm going to go on and have a conversation"? For me, whenever I do that, I always kind of have this like analysis going on in my head of how I think, trying to predict how a conversation might go, or things that might get said or might get asked. Was there anything where you're like, "Hey, I kind of hope Kevin mentions this so I can chat about it a little bit," or anything like that? Has there been anything that I didn't ask that you're like, "I wanted to talk about that and he didn't bring it up"? So kind of throwing it out there.
Yeah, I didn't really have anything in mind, so I wasn't really focused on that ahead of time. I feel that, talking about D&D with kids is really what I like to talk about. I think it's a lot of fun. I think people who play D&D oftentimes they don't bring their kids into the game until their kids are already old enough to have other interests. And I think that's one of the big things I like to talk about. So many parents are like, my kid doesn't want to play D&D, and their kid's 12. And I'm like, well, they by the time they hit 12, they played so many other video games and so much else in their life that they wanted to do that D&D isn't interesting to them. And so I really recommend, start them early, bring them into the game, use their imagination. Kids have such great imaginations. I mean, so many of the monsters I use in the games that I play and run were created by my son, because he just doesn't have the same, imagination restrictions that the rest of us have, that we've kind of followed along with society, with the media we've been exposed to. But when you're 4 and 5 years old, you don't have that. And so your mind thinks of the weirdest things, and sometimes they're fantastic. And so I think I would love to see more parents get involved with their kids early. I've had a couple people recently on Twitter reach out asking for advice, and I've watched them since then be able to, really be inspired to jump into the games with their kids at a very early age, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And they're having a lot of fun, and they're really engaging in it. Plus the fact that D&D is such a great bonding experience from parents to kids. There's just so much you can know about your child when you watch them play D&D, and you watch their imagination run, and you see what their character is going to do, and you see how their character is going to handle a certain situation that might actually give your child problems in life, and their character can handle it in a different way. And then you can use that as an example in their life to guide them. It's just such a great experience. And I mean, I'm a D&D for kids evangelist, I guess you'd say. I'm ready to talk all about it forever.
I think it's a really cool way to, like, communication is obviously key in any sort of a role-playing game, but it's sometimes communication is also sometimes a skill that people struggle with. And I think if you're playing these sorts of games with a kid, you'll get to know your kid a lot better as well. Like, you're going to know how their mind works on things in situations that you may not have ever encountered in your day-to-day life. And you might find things that you might uncover interests or fears or anything that you wouldn't have found in any other way.
Definitely. I mean, there's just so much. And like with the kids that I run games for, I mean, I get to know them so well because they show me what they're interested in by how their character reacts or what the character does. I mean, this character doesn't want to fight, but he wants to go search for treasure. And this character wants to do this. And it's just so much an insight right into who they are as a person. And it's fascinating. And I hope all parents get a chance to see their kids that way, because I know we're so busy in the world today, and it's so hard to take a long time to do something. But D&D is one of those things where it's like an instant connection with your kid, and you're kind of open. And I say the same thing for spouses as well. I mean, my wife and I play a lot of D&D. Before our kid was born, we played every day, 4 to 6 hours a day, most days, some days more, depending on, after I get home from work, it's all we did. That was our entertainment. And we just played our campaign. And it's amazing how close you become with someone when you spend that kind of time together, just playing D&D and experiencing a whole fantasy world because of these things.
I forget how I was going to word this question now. I had something, and then you kind of you started talking about your wife. Yeah. And I was like, I need to get my wife back into a game because she hasn't played in a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, with the kids, Oh, I remember where I was going to go now. I kind of see the same thing often. So I coach hockey, and you get to see sides of kids whenever they're facing adversity in there. So like when a game goes really
Yeah.
poorly, or even when it goes really well, but definitely when it goes very poorly, and you kind of see the stress and disappointment and sometimes other emotions all mixed in there as well with these kids. And you're seeing a side of them that I sometimes wonder if their parents are seeing. Some
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
of how these kids, some of them crumble under it and other ones just thrive. Like there's a kid that's been on the last couple of years of my son's team that I've been coaching, and it's amazing watching when everything goes down. Like that kid's going to be a leader of some sort later on in his life, because just the way that he doesn't let it affect him. He gets everybody rallied back up, and I think seeing that, even if it's in a game form where a kid takes their character and makes that character
Yeah.
fulfill that
100%.
role. I think that would be something that the parents would find very rewarding, in seeing those personalities of their kids coming out. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Coaching and dungeon mastering for kids seem to be a very, very similar to me. Where you see a side of the kids that you wonder if the parents are seeing that. I mean, I wonder. Like I'll oftentimes try to give feedback to the parents on what I saw their kids doing, and sometimes they're surprised. They're like, "Really, my kid did that?" They're like, "My kid," and I'm like, "Yeah." I mean, it was great to see, and it's fun to see which kids are gonna really thrive when things get dangerous, or when their kids making death saves. How do they handle that? I have a couple kids, just they roll a natural one, and they just laugh, and they have they think it's great, and they want to see what the story's going to go. And other kids roll that natural one, and they're like, they're almost breaking down because their character failed. And so it's just such a wide range of reactions, and it's really fascinating for me to see that and to be able to help those kids. And there is a lot of coaching there, and how do you handle that failure when your character fails or anything of that sort. So
Yeah.
it's very rewarding. I think every parent should do it. Every parent should be involved in that level with their kids in some way.
Yeah, that's really awesome. The I'm going to spin off of the topic of that with hockey a little bit.
Sure.
We were chatting right before we hit the record button about Utah getting a new hockey team here coming up. If you had to pick a fantasy creature or a fantasy term to name said team after, because they don't yet have a name, what would you name the new Utah or Salt Lake City, depending which way they go? I think it's going to be Utah something. What would you suspect they should name that team?
Oh, I don't. That's a tough one. It's hard to beat the Kraken. I think
that's up there on amazing monster names, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just to be able to release the Kraken on the other team is just amazing. I don't know. It'll be interesting. Utah doesn't have the best names. They kept the ZZ aspect from the Jazz and the Buzz and the Grizzlies and all these different teams for their sports. So we'll see what they come up with, if they're going to keep with that or not. But I mean, being Redwyrm, I mean, I'm kind of partial to dragons. I definitely think they're amazing. So I would love to see some sort of dragon or creature of that sort. Fantasy creatures are my favorite. So
yeah, I can't think of any hockey team, at least not in North America. I'm sure that probably is in some of the European leagues, but I can't think of any team in North American hockey, like whether it's NHL or the lower leagues, that's had a really, really good fantasy monster outside of the Kraken on it. But yeah, I think maybe going that route would be good. You should submit. Yeah. I'm sure they'll have a public submission.
I'm sure they do. Yeah.
And you should get yourself and the young fella in to submit some designs in there. You never know, his drawing might be on the jersey at some point.
Oh gosh, he would love that. Yeah.
Where can people find you and find these awesome tweets that we're talking about, and the music and everything else?
Yeah, so at Redwyrm Official on Twitter, that's the main place I post. I have an Instagram account and the other socials as well, but I don't use them very much compared to Twitter. My website is wormden, WYRMDEN.com. And we have a blog on there for my son. He has a little blog called Improve Your Game that he likes to run, where he just gives out tips whenever he feels like it. So there's no schedule on those releases. He just does it when he wants to. And but we do have some videos. You can find my music on there as well. So
awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Please, pass along to him how much I've enjoyed all the tips and everything else that he's put out there. I really enjoyed speaking with you. I think that was a fantastic conversation. I appreciate you coming on and
yeah, it's been awesome. I really appreciate you having me on.
And yeah, everybody should go check that out. Keep an eye out for the Drive-Thru RPG or posting when it comes out, and go check out the music. And yeah, thank you very much for coming on. I really, really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, folks, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Red Caps podcast. I hope you enjoyed. You learned something that you were eager to come back for more. www.theredcaps.net has all the links for all the ways to contact me, and I would love to hear from you. Thank you ever so much for listening. And remember, never let your caps dry out. Stay safe. Have fun. We'll talk again soon. Take care.